Hey guys, welcome to the Vinyl Rundown. Very special edition with Zev Feldman, and we've got a bunch of Record Store Day releases to talk about. Zev, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Nice to be with you, Greg. Thanks for having me back.
You're so welcome. I think we're going to end up doing a two-part series because Zev has so much stuff to go over. As always, he's taking advantage of Record Store, which is coming up in less than a week. But first, over my shoulder, we have to acknowledge the passing of the great Ahmad Jamal, who just passed away on Sunday. And you were lucky enough to work with him recently. We don't want to spend too much time on that, but tell us your thoughts about working with and getting to meet Ahmad Jamal.
I think I was very fortunate, and it was a wonderful experience. He was a great man, and I felt very privileged to work on the last productions of his life and career. And basically, we started working together in 2021, going through these recordings that made up this series called Emerald City Nights, which are captured live at the Penthouse going back from 1963 and going to run all the way up through 1968. We put our first two volumes out last year on my Jazz Detective label, but working with Mr. Jamal was a real privilege and a great process. Learned a lot from working with him and his associate, Andrew Stamen. But Mr. Jamal was actively involved in all aspects of the production, from choosing the material to weighing in on the audio during the mastering and mastering stages, I should say, the artwork, the editorial content. He made the final say on everything, and he was a pro, and it was a real privilege. I've been listening, like a lot of your viewers out there. I've been listening to his music my whole life. So when you get a chance to work with someone that you admire, it really has some special meaning. And I'm at a loss for words to really describe his greatness in terms of being the pioneer and innovator he was in his field in this music. But it was a really great experience. I'm glad we had a chance to do it, and it was also meaningful because he loved the project and we was critically acclaimed. And what a send off for him. So very sad, but also what a life well lived. What a great
And
man
he was active and still able to play into his 90s, it looks like, right?
he was. He was indeed.
And there's the record over my shoulder, one of two records, both two record sets, wonderful sounding records up there in Seattle. Okay, that was a little side note. We must honor the maestro who just passed. Then I just want to also ask about the Jazz Detective, your own label, your own imprint that you started. Tell us just a little bit about that. How many records do you have out? Who is it? Who is it in conjunction with in terms of the labels behind it?
Sure. So in 2022, I founded my own label, actually a music group of multiple labels called Deep Digs Music Group. And underneath that umbrella is my label, Jazz Detective. And this is a partnership with my good friends at Elemental Music, where I've been producing records since about 2013. Amazing, about 2011, actually. It's been a few years. Anyways, after working together for a while, I wanted to have my own imprint as well, to put out projects that I was passionate about, and we came about and did that. The first inaugural releases were the two Ahmad Jamal albums, part of Emerald City Nights, which we put out last year. And this year, we've got two more titles on my label. First of all, for Record Store Day, here we're going to be talking about a Chet Baker release that's on Jazz Detective, and also a Sonny Stitt recording from the Left Bank, also on Jazz Detective. It's just an avenue for me to put out more projects that I'm passionate about. Not everything works with all of my clients, but there's some that I remain very committed to, and I feel very lucky to be able to do this. So I'm just, there's a lot of projects that need love, that need to find homes, and this is provided to be an outlet for that. So I'm
And
very excited.
this is one of the few record labels where the name describes the person behind it perfectly, because you are the jazz detective. And I got to say, I'm jealous of you getting to just travel all over the world and meet some of the greatest musicians in their states and listen to these great records. I just, for somebody who loves jazz and is a very terrible, mediocre musician, that you've got, you're living the dream. So congratulations again,
Thank you.
and more years of success, which I'm sure you'll have. So let's talk about. This is part one of a part two series here, and the part one we're going to talk about is a thing that I don't think everybody knows about. But since you're from the Baltimore area, the left bank. Before we get into the records, what is the left bank and why is it important?
Well, thanks, Greg. The Left Bank Jazz Society was a nonprofit organization that was founded sometime in the early to mid 1960s in Baltimore, and this is a multicultural, diverse organization. Men, women, black, white, everyone came together who were jazz fans, and it was this organization in the Baltimore area that put on concerts on Sunday afternoons, and families would come down. It was a place called the Famous Ballroom at 1711 North Charles Street. And they also had some other venues that they recorded concerts with too, including a club called the Madison Club. And there were other locations. They even did concerts sometimes at different prisons, believe it or not. But the Left Bank was really known for this room called the Famous Ballroom, and they would do these concerts on Sunday. And there was a gentleman named Vernon Welsh who was one of the officers of the organization. Well, like a lot of the other members of this group, they had day jobs during the week, but they were all passionate music fans, jazz fans, and on Sundays they would host these concerts. And then Vernon, with the permission of the artists, would make recordings on a reel-to-reel machine that they had at the club, and then they would play them back. They were made because people that were working these events didn't have the chance to really sit back and absorb the music. They were busy with what was happening running the concert. So they would have staff meetings on Wednesday, and they would have a playback, and it was these recordings were made. And I'm from the state of Maryland. I grew up actually a little closer to the Washington area here in Montgomery County, but the Left Bank was an institution. I first became familiar, and a lot of people here might echo this as well. There were these two Joe Henderson recordings that Verve Records put out around 1994, 95. One was called Four, and the other one was called Straight No Chaser. And this was Joe Henderson in '68 with Wynton Kelly, Paul Chambers, and Billy Higgins. And you should check out these releases because they are fantastic. I also, just being a record collecting geek, came across these recordings sometime in the late '90s on the VJ Japan label of Wynton Kelly Trio with George Coleman. And they were also recorded at the Left Bank. And then in the early 2000s, Joel Dorn, the legendary late great producer, on his label M Imprint, issued more recordings from the Left Bank. And I want to say it all started about 2007 for me. I was introduced to a gentleman named John Fowler, who was one of the officers of the Left Bank, and he was the custodian of the tapes at that time, still is now, although we're kind of co-custodians because we both have been working together to digitize these tapes. Pardon me, digitize these tapes over the last number of years. Thanks to my friend Joe Lee of Joe's Record Paradise and a gentleman named Bertrand Uberall, they gave some good character references for me and had explained to Mr. Fowler about 7 years ago that, hey, there's this guy, Zev. He's like putting out live recordings and unissued gems, and you two should meet. So we got together, and over the last number of years, I moved back to the Washington, D.C., Maryland area last June of 2022. But before that, for the last 6-7 years, I was making trips. I'd come here to Maryland. I would see my parents, and I would always make a trip to Baltimore to see John Fowler, and I would be taking literally suitcases full at a time of tapes from Baltimore back to Los Angeles. I'd have to do the TSA. hand inspection without it going through the
X-rays.
X-rays. So you would see this
Uh,
crazy guy with the tapes for an hour while they were going through, and we were digitizing them.
How many? Do you know how many? A, how many concerts they did, and B, how many made it onto tape? There must be hundreds.
Well, we have a yearbook, thankfully, at least one of them that I have up until the mid 70s. I don't know. I'm just speculating. A couple of hundred shows. This went on for years, and you know, this organization, though, there were these, you know, they brought in the greatest talent up and down the East Coast, from New York, from Philadelphia, and Washington as well. But we had names. John Coltrane played there. Sonny Rollins, Wes Montgomery, Grant Green. And a cornucopia of individuals that were on the scene then. And it was great because it was close proximity to New York. You could literally take the train in, you would do this afternoon concert, and then you could go right back up afterwards or drive home. And, you know, Baltimore is about maybe an hour and a half from Philadelphia, a little longer than that. So everything was in close proximity. But it was the hard work of this organization that organized these concerts, brought them in. And thankfully, I mean, not everything was recorded, Greg, because they gave the artist an opportunity to be recorded. They could say yes or no. And how it usually went was, if they said yes, the artist was given a copy of the tape, and then the foundation held on to the recording tape as well. Now, for instance, with the Joe Henderson releases that came out on Verve, this was the case because the recordings that came out, I spoke with former Verve producer and executive Richard Seidel recently, who explained to me, well, Zev, those tapes that we put out came from Joe's collection. So those came from the tapes that Vernon Welsh made. And it's just a whole amazing story because the music that was being recorded here, the artists that were coming here to Baltimore were international superstars. They traveled the world. And it was like bringing something here, bringing that experience for these fans here. But it was a really wonderful vibe and atmosphere. Like I said, families would come. There would be somebody making pastries and baked goods. Somebody had fried chicken and other food. And people would come for the afternoon. It was a wholesome family environment. But, you know, make no mistake about it, some of the greatest musicians played. Even Sun Ra played there.
Wow.
In 1978. You can see the movie A Joyful Noise from Robert and Movie. There's actually some visuals that were made at the Left Bank. Go check it out. It's
I've seen that. That's available on YouTube. And I was going to ask, is there any videos of any Left Bank? So there's at least one.
There's one. But I want to just kind of flash forward with my story. So we've been digitizing these tapes. George Claben at Resonance Records was generous enough to help us in our mission. And he would get first dibs if there was something that he wanted to put out. Resonance has been lucky. There have been a lot of other great projects that we prioritized at the label, but we had these digitized copies. And several years back, my good friend Corey Weeds from Reel to Reel, the label that we founded together, part of his Cellar Live music group, Corey stepped up. He was like, Zev, this music is amazing. And we spent time listening to these digitized copies. And at first, on Reel to Reel, we put out Etta Jones, the great vocalist with the Cedar Walton Trio, on a Sunday afternoon. A couple of years back, we put out this record that I know many people know now called Understanding, from the great drummer Roy Brooks, featuring Woody Shaw and Carlos Gannett, Harold Mayburn, and Cecil McBee. And last year, you know, there were some additional tapes that surfaced at the Left Bank vaults that we hadn't seen before. It's about the last year and a half or so. Shirley Scott, Sonny Stitt, and Walter Bishop Jr. And these three tapes, along with a few others, stood out to us. And Corey and I we devised a plan to put these out. Corey would put out this Shirley Scott release called Queen Talk, live at the Left Bank. This is on the Reel to Reel label. Corey and I co-produced all these. We also have a Walter Bishop Jr., Bish at the Bank. These are recordings made in 1966 and 1967 with Harold Vick, Lou McIntosh, and Dick Burke on drums. And then a gentleman who lived here in the state of Maryland, Sonny Stitt. This is bopping in Baltimore, pardon my hands. These are recordings that Corey and I really loved and we wanted to work on together. So we put two on reel to reel and we put one on my new Jazz Detective imprint. And we work with the same team of people that we work with usually on a lot of our other productions. Zach Shelby Sisko, who a lot of folks know from my various Blue Note Resonance releases, he joined up on board for this. And it was just a lot of love. This is really passion driven by the music. These were tapes that really stuck out to Corey and I, music that we were just taken with. And we wanted to go ahead and put these out. And like everything we do, we work with the families, we find the musicians. And it's really wonderful to see this realized. I hope folks are going to appreciate this. These are time capsule documents that a lot of work went into. This is for collectors and for connoisseurs that we do these limited editions for Record Store Day. So I'm very grateful to the Record Store Day for allowing these to be given birth. We're only making 2,000 to 3,000 on each of them, and they're limited editions, but it's wonderful music. It's keepsakes. It's also a legacy of the artist, celebrates the legacy of the artists, and also this great organization, the Left Bank Jazz Society.
Great. Did you want to go into any more detail on any one of those three or all three?
Sure.
Flash by them real quick.
Yeah, no problem. So we can start with Sonny Stitt again, Bop It in Baltimore. This is a recording that was made November 11th, 73 with Sonny Stitt, Kenny Barron, Sam Jones, and Louis Hayes. We actually spoke with we actually spoke with Kenny Barron and Louis Hayes for the project. Liner notes by the great Bob Blumenthal. And a lot of photos that you've never seen before and interviews with other individuals. Really a wonderful release. We actually spoke with Charles McPherson. Sonny Stitt was just a man deeply rooted in tradition, bebop jazz, and other recordings going back. And he came from a different era, and this is timeless music. It aged so well when we listen to what comes out now. Sonny Stitt was just one of the masters. And this recording was pressed at Optimal in Germany, mastered by Bernie Grunman, and it's a deluxe 180-gram presentation. There's also
two discs or one disc?
2 LPs.
All these are 2 discs.
Yeah, and there's also a single CD set too. And we'll talk about Walter Bishop Jr. Again, talking about, I got to move it around here, bebop jazz.
Oh, let me. I can do this and no, it's actually better this way.
There you go.
Wider angle.
So Walter Bishop Jr. was just, he played with Charlie Parker. He came from, again, another era. I think, to me, really an unsung hero. I discovered his recordings on Muse, also with Xanadu records from Don Schlitten. And Walter Bishop is just really a guy that doesn't get spoken about. And it was an opportunity to really pay tribute. These recordings feature Harold Vick on sax, someone who I think a lot of us have grown to appreciate as the years have gone by. Folks know him from that Steppin' Out record on Blue Note, but he was very active, even recording for Muse and various other labels. He even played with Jack DeJohnette and countless others. He was a mainstay of the New York scene. But you can't say enough, excuse me, about Walter Bishop Jr. So I felt like we got to put something out. And really a wonderful package. Liner notes by Ted Pankin, also an essay by Brett Premack, and just a lot of heartfelt love for Walter Bishop Jr. The Bish at the Bank was mastered by Kevin Gray and pressed at Standard Vinyl in Canada, which has been doing some great work for us lately. I'm very excited about that. So that's Walter Bishop Jr. Shirley Scott, Queen Talk, live at the Left Bank. This is a recording made on August 20th, 1972, with the great George Coleman on sax, the legendary drummer Bobby Durham, who a lot of folks know from playing with Monty Alexander or Oscar Peterson. Amazing release. And by the way, and Ernie Andrews is a special guest vocalist on a few tracks. Shirley Scott is someone who was a trailblazer in a landscape that was so male dominated, but she combines gospel and blues and jazz. A lot of us now, I can speak for myself, have collected all of these sessions that she made for labels like Prestige, even Chess or Argo, or is it Cadet? One of the chess labels. And there's even a recent release that Kraft put out of her and Eddie Lockjaw Davis. She's really important. She matters. And this was a project that we got to the late great Joey DeFrancesco before he passed away.
Oh my goodness.
We interviewed him for this release. He was taken with the music and thought it was great. And again, it's a collector's document, live recording. We like all these projects, we start with these tapes, but there's editing and things that we have to do to curate it down to be a listening experience. But Shirley Scott matters. She's a very important artist. For this package, we had also liner notes by A. Scott Galloway. People know him from Wax Poetics and numerous other writings that he's made over the years. A great journalist. And we put in Tim Warfield too. I mean, we have a great team of voices that were assembled, not to mention photographs that were never published. We even lucked out because to see this cover, front, back, there's even a booklet photo. We do all these projects. We do extensive photo research. I want to show you too. There's a Don Schlitten picture that we got from his archives.
Beautiful black and white, yeah.
Thank you. And here again is this other picture. This was from a photo session made by the great photographer Raymond Ross. He was like all over New York City amongst other places, globally, I'm sure too. But Raymond Ross was a great photographer working with CTS Images, Cynthia Sesso, the great archivist and agent. We were able to find these pictures and it all lined up. We really strive to create. I do, and I speak for Corey and the work that we do in these other productions. It's about not just having great music, but trying to put together a great experience visually, writings, something to look through. These should be all dynamic packagings. I know that there's a lot of things that people can be spending their money on, but when they spend their hard-earned money on one of these productions that I'm affiliated with, I really try to go above and beyond. I want to knock people out. I want this to jump out at them when they're standing in line or going to record store day and waiting and you finally get it home. There's a lot of love. And speaking of, again, the aesthetics of what go into this, John Sellers is a wonderful designer that we've had the good fortune to collaborate with for a number of years. He designed the covers and he did a great job in the packaging. And this is just something that has a feeling designed almost very vintage to the era when these came out. I wanted these records to have a look and feel to them that were exciting. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the Shirley Scott, like the Walter Bishop, was also mastered by Kevin Gray and pressed on 180-gram vinyl at Standard Vinyl. We also worked with the great engineer in Vancouver, Sheldon Zaharko, who's worked with us on many of our productions. He actually did my Ahmad Jamal recordings behind you too. And, it's a team. It's not, I'm one guy. I get to come up here and represent this stuff and be the face at times, but it takes a team of us to put these together. And especially on the label side, the generosity from the people that back these projects, it's not for the faint at heart. It's a lot of resources that go into it. It's a lot of risk, but there's a lot of love and a lot of passion. And
all your releases, I mean, I have to give you credit. They're almost like coffee table books with records. There's so much photography, there's so much reading. Sometimes I've got your records and I think, I got to read all this before I talk to Zev. This is like a mini book. When I interviewed what's the young man's name? Zach, was that his name? The Sonny Rollins biographer, not Zach.
Oh, Aiden Levy. Sure.
Aiden. Why did I get Zach? Aiden. The liner notes he wrote for the Sonny Rollins, that was almost a book in itself.
What?
And to your point, you're getting such an education with these records in terms of not just the music, but the beautiful photography, the reading material, uh, all these musicians that show up to show their love and give these interviews. It's great.
Yeah, thanks.
And nobody else is putting this much effort into these re-releases, because the re-release business, to be honest, used to be a little bit of a schmata business. Okay, in the olden days, it's like, hey, we dug up this old cassette and it was on the radio and we slapped it together, and you're taking it to a much different level. So
And these aren't really re-releases. I like
not right. You know what I mean.
Oh, sure. I call them
Unreleased.
I call them archival discovery.
Archival discovery. That's a better word.
I don't.
Got it. Zev, I think we've covered the whole Left Bank series here, so we're going to sign off and want the folks to stay tuned for part 2, when we're going to get into the other 3 monster releases you have coming out. So thanks very much, Zev, and we will talk to everybody soon. All right.
Thanks to everyone out there for your support. Really appreciate it. Can't do it without everyone. And you too, Greg.
All right. I try.